The surveyor's report was still warm from the printer when I slid it onto the kitchen table. Glossy, stiff paper, edges curling slightly, like it didn't want to be held accountable either. I kept one hand on it while my other thumb hovered over the contact card for Greg V., my neighbor, the man who'd gone out of his way to make this personal. The thing you need to understand is, I'm not the guy who starts fights with neighbors. I've lived in this house 12 years. It's a plain, 3-bedroom ranch with a sloped backyard, decent bones, nothing fancy. I'm a contractor, fences, decks, sheds, anything wood and built to last. I keep my yard clean, mow weekly, wave at folks walking dogs even if I don't know their names. I don't play music loud, and I shovel both sides of the sidewalk in winter. Just a regular guy trying to be a good neighbor. Which is exactly why what Greg did hit me like a sucker punch. He and his wife, Amanda, moved in about 2 years ago. Nice-looking couple, mid-40s like me. No kids that I know of. When they first arrived, I brought over a 6-pack of IPA and a list of local tradespeople, plumber, electrician, appliance repair, just trying to help. He took the beer but barely looked up from his phone while I talked. Amanda did all the smiling. I should have clocked it then. The fence situation started last summer. My backyard slopes slightly, so I'd built a custom cedar fence years ago, 6 feet tall, pressure-treated posts, sunk proper below the frost line. HOA had approved the original plans when I moved in. It wasn't flashy, but it kept the dogs in and gave me some privacy on the back patio. But after 12 New England winters, it started to lean in one spot near where our properties meet. Nothing dangerous, cosmetic mostly. I'd been planning to replace that section once the spring thaw came. Greg got there first. It was a Tuesday, March, still cold enough in the morning to see your breath. I came home from a job early and found a folded letter taped to my front door. HOA stationery. Concern regarding unauthorized fence alterations, typed in bold. Someone unnamed had reported a non-compliant structural lien that may impact neighboring property drainage. I stared at it for a full minute before I laughed, like out loud. I didn't even know structural lien was a phrase. It sounded like the fence was plotting revolution. But the laughter didn't last. There were dates listed for compliance, a threat of fines, and a lovely little footnote. Report submitted by G. Vanier, Lot 27. That's Greg. That smug bastard didn't even bother to hide it, put his name right there like he was proud. So I did what any contractor would do. I fixed the damn fence. I took a Saturday, dug out the old posts, repoured concrete, put in new ones with extra rebar, and leveled everything with a laser like I was prepping for the Olympics. Sent before and after photos to the HOA. They thanked me. Case closed. I didn't mention Greg. I figured maybe he was just twitchy about property lines, maybe a little too in love with bylaws. Whatever, I'd handled it. No need to make it worse. And that was my mistake. Because 3 weeks later, I came home to the sound of power tools screaming from the other side of the fence. The smell of cut pine was thick in the air. I walked around the side of the house to see what he was doing. That's when I saw it, a half-built raised deck, maybe 10 feet off the ground, cantilevered right up to my property line. Like inches. I stood there with my mouth half open, staring at it. The posts were already sunk and too damn close to my side. No flags, no boundary markers, no survey strings, just Greg up on a ladder with a nail gun, acting like this was his kingdom and I should be honored to witness his latest expansion. He looked down at me and smirked. Didn't think you'd be home this early, he said, wiping his hands on his jeans. Hope the noise isn't too much. I didn't answer right away. I was trying to think, trying not to explode. Instead, I pointed. How close is that post to the line? He shrugged. It's on my side. Looks like about 3 inches of air between that and my grass. He gave a little chuckle. Yeah, well, the plans are with the city. Everything's fine. Except it was. Because I'd never seen a permit, and the HOA hadn't said a word. And Greg, the same guy who'd tattled on me for a leaning fence, he hadn't said jack about building a deck that could host a wedding reception practically hanging over my backyard. That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and kept hearing the nail gun in my head. I wasn't mad about the deck itself. If he'd come to me, told me his plans, we probably could have worked something out. Hell, I might have even helped him build it. But the fact that he snitched over a warped fence board and then built something way more intrusive without a word. That told me everything I needed to know. Greg wasn't just annoying, he was strategic. And that meant I had to be too. I called in a surveyor. Cost me more than I wanted to spend, but I needed proof. Needed to know down to the inch where my property ended and his began. The guy came out on a windy Thursday, took all his measurements with a GPS rover and total station, and promised to send the final map within the week. While he worked, Amanda came outside with a glass of wine and acted like she was just out enjoying the breeze. Having work done, she asked coy. "Just confirming boundaries," I said. She tilted her head. "Oh, that sounds serious." I smiled. "Only if the results are." The report came back Friday. I opened it like I was holding a lab result. And there it was, plain as day. One support post, 8 inches inside my property line. 8. That might not sound like much, but in legal terms, that's invasion, that's encroachment, that's my land being used without consent. Greg had literally planted his damn deck in my yard. I took a picture of the section with a tape measure stretched across it, sent it to the HOA with the survey report attached, asked for an immediate compliance review. They said they'd open a case. I wasn't satisfied, so I knocked on Greg's door. He answered wearing a Celtics hoodie and holding a bowl of cereal like it was Sunday brunch. "Hey," I said, "got a minute?" He leaned against the doorframe. "Sure, what's up?" "I got a survey done, your deck over the line." He blinked but didn't flinch. "I don't think so. I have a certified map that says otherwise. One of your posts is 8 inches into my property." He scoffed. "Come on, man, 8 inches, that's nothing. It's not like I'm building a pool. That post is concrete. That means you trespassed when you dug the hole." He stared at me. "You're really gonna make this a thing?" "You already did." For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "Well, maybe you should have built your fence better the first time." That's when I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a war. The knock came hard and fast, not like someone asking to borrow sugar, more like a cop with a warrant. By the time I opened the door, Greg was already halfway down my front steps, red in the face, HOA letter crumpled in his fist. "You went to the board," he shouted, loud enough for the whole block to hear. I stepped out onto the porch and shut the door behind me. "No, I went to a surveyor. The board got the facts." Greg whipped the paper at my feet. "You seriously think this means anything? It's a few inches, man. It's 8 and it's my 8. He shoved his hands into his hoodie pockets and paced a few feet. "This is such bulls **T. You're just doing this because I reported your fence." I didn't deny it. Instead, I said, "You went the official route with me, so I figured you'd respect the same process. You could have just talked to me." "I did remember you said it's on my side. That was your talk." He bit his cheek and stared at my lawn like it had insulted his mother. Then he turned and left without another word. That should have been the end of it, but with Greg's, nothing ever ended clean. The following Monday, I got a notice from the HOA. They were investigating mutual property concerns raised by homeowners on lots 26 and 27. Apparently, Greg filed a counter-complaint. He claimed my new fence line was obscuring his line of sight from his deck and negatively impacting natural light and neighborhood aesthetic. It would have been hilarious if it wasn't so manipulative. I called Karen. Yes, that's really her name, the HOA compliance officer. She's been in the role since before I moved in, the kind of person who speaks in half clauses like a voicemail message. "Hi, Karen," I said, trying to stay civil. "Just got your letter. I'm curious, did Greg provide any proof that my fence violates code?" There was a long pause followed by her usual flat tone. "He submitted a photo, but we have no record of your updated fence plans." "I didn't update the fence. I repaired it, same materials, same location, same height." "Well," she said, "if it appears altered in any way, it does trigger a fresh compliance review, including his deck blocking the sky. We're evaluating both cases simultaneously." I hung up before I said something I'd regret. That night, I pulled out the original HOA-approved blueprints for my house and fence. I also printed a fresh copy of the surveyor's report and circled the offending post like it was Exhibit A. Then I started a new folder on my desktop called Greg War. Because that's what it was now. And I wasn't going to lose. Here's the thing most people don't realize: when you work construction for a living, you deal with a lot of inspectors. You learn how codes are written and, more importantly, how they're enforced. You learn the difference between what looks harmless and what legally constitutes a problem. In Greg's deck, it had problems. Big ones. The railing on one side wasn't up to code, the support posts weren't properly bracketed, and the platform itself, based on the measurements I'd taken while he wasn't home, was at least 2 feet higher than the maximum height allowed without a special permit from the city. So I made a few calls. First to the municipal building inspector's office, then to a zoning clerk, then to a friend of mine, Derek, who used to work permits before starting his own deck business. Within 2 days, I had confirmation Greg had not filed any permits. Which meant I wasn't just dealing with a bad neighbor. I was dealing with an illegal structure. I didn't go nuclear right away. I gave him one last chance. Saturday morning, I walked over while he was watering the sad strip of hydrangeas along his driveway. "Hey," I said, trying not to sound like I wanted to strangle him. "Listen, I talked to the city. There's no record of your deck being permitted." He kept watering. "Okay," he said without looking at me. "I'm giving you a heads up. If you file now, they'll probably just fine you and make you bring it up to code. And if I do..." I looked him in the eye, "then it comes down." He turned off the hose and coiled it slowly, deliberately. "You really want to escalate this?" I laughed once. "You reported my fence for leaning." He opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, then changed his mind. "Do what you gotta do," he muttered and walked inside. So I did. The complaint I submitted to the city included photos, survey documents, and a list of violations I documented down to the screw spacing. I emailed it, I printed it, I even mailed a hard copy certified. By the end of the week, a city inspector was scheduled for an on-site visit. And that's when things really started to heat up. The morning of the inspection, Greg was outside in a polo shirt, sipping coffee like it was just another Thursday. The inspector, a guy named Calvin in steel-toed boots and a neon vest, showed up with a clipboard and a frown. "Mr. Vanier," he asked. Greg waved. "Yep. I'm here about a deck." Greg pointed. "There it is." Calvin didn't smile. He walked around the structure, took photos, jotted notes, then started measuring with a laser range finder. When he hit the support post that crossed the property line, he paused and looked up at Greg. "Was this post here when you bought the house?" Greg hesitated. "No, I built it." "Did you file for a building permit?" Greg scratched the back of his head. "I didn't think I needed one, it's just a deck. Anything over 30 inches off the ground needs a permit. Yours is about 94, that's almost a patio balcony." "I didn't know that." Calvin nodded, stone-faced. "Ignorance of code doesn't exempt it." I stood on my porch sipping my own coffee, watching it all play out like a court drama. Greg caught my eye once. He didn't smile. That night, I found a printed note tucked under my windshield wiper. No envelope, just a folded piece of paper typed in all caps. "You could have handled this like a man. Enjoy the next 6 months of hell." It wasn't signed. Didn't need to be. Over the next week, Greg started construction on a privacy screen, a massive 10-foot-high wall on his deck side facing my yard. It wasn't just to block the view, it was clearly designed to be an eyesore. Raw plywood, no paint, screws sticking out. It looked like something from a zombie movie. He was punishing me with ugliness. Amanda stopped waving when we passed each other. Even the dog, a little white mutt they'd rescued, seemed to be trained not to look at me. But it didn't matter. Because 2 days later, Calvin returned with a red tag and posted it right on Greg's deck support beam. Construction HALTED, violation of city code, subject to penalties. I don't know if Greg saw me smiling when I read it from my living room window. But I really hope he did. The bright red tag flapped in the breeze like a party streamer, except no one was celebrating. The deck itself looked empty and exposed in the daylight, raw wood now a monument to ego and entitlement. But across the yard, Greg was already on his knees, ripping up boards like he thought clawing them out fast enough could undo what he'd done. It didn't take long for word to spread. HOA neighborhoods thrive on gossip like it's currency, and a deck getting shut down by city code enforcement, that's like winning the HOA lottery if you're not the one paying the fine. By Sunday afternoon, people were strolling slower past our houses. Lawn chairs were angled just a little more toward Greg's yard. Mrs. Latham from 2 houses down even baked zucchini bread and just happened to stop by my place to drop it off. You didn't hear it from me, she said, not even pretending, but apparently someone's building without permits. Can you imagine? I smiled politely and thanked her for the bread. Greg, for his part, kept his head down. Every day after work, he was out there dismantling the upper level of the deck. He left the lower platform intact, probably hopping to salvage something. But the privacy screen, still standing, that plywood monstrosity wasn't going anywhere. He was too stubborn to take that down. Too proud to admit he lost the war he started. 2 weeks later, I got an official letter from the city, a copy of the violation plus a brief note that read, "Structure must be brought into compliance by July 18. Failure to comply will result in fines up to $500 per day and potential legal action." I tucked it in my folder. That same day, I noticed Amanda outside, standing by their garage, smoking a cigarette. It was the first time I'd ever seen her smoke. She looked tired, not like she hadn't slept, but like she was done with whatever this whole neighborhood feud had become. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Here where things took a turn. I expected Greg to stay combative, maybe appeal the city, try to delay compliance, drag this out. But instead he pivoted. Hard. He sent me a text. Greg v. Neighbor. Hey look man. I want to talk, no drama, just two guys sorting this out. You free tonight? I stared at it for a while, no threats, no passive-aggressive punctuation, just civil. I wasn't sure if it was a trap, but I replied. May. Sure, I'll be home after 6. That evening he knocked on my door. Same guy, Celtics hoodie, messy hair, but his body language was different. Shoulders loose, not posturing. He didn't ask to come in, just stood there holding a 6-pack of Sam Adams. I brought a peace offering, he said. We don't have to drink 'em. I took them anyway and stepped outside with him. We sat on my porch. And for the first few minutes, neither of us said much. Then he cleared his throat. I didn't think the post was over the line, he said. I really didn't. I nodded slowly. Okay. I mean, yeah, I could have checked, should have probably, but I just figured, I don't know, that you wouldn't care. Because I'm the guy who minds his business. He looked down. Yeah, that. I let that hang there a second. You reported me for offense, I said, that I already planned to fix. You didn't knock, you didn't ask, you just filed the complaint. He rubbed his face. I was still pissed from that winter storm. Remember when the snow from your roof slid off and crushed that corner of my mulch bed? You mean the 4 inches of landscaping you planted next to the storm drain? He smiled faintly. Yeah, that. And instead of saying anything, you just waited until you could file something. He didn't deny it. Honestly, he said, I think I just wanted to feel like I had some control. That stopped me. Not because I forgave him, but because that was the first thing he'd said that sounded honest. Turns out Greg had lost his job 3 months before they bought the house. Amanda didn't know at first. He'd been consulting, trying to land clients, scraping by on savings. Then COVID happened and the industry collapsed. He eventually told her, but not until they were already in escrow. She was furious. He promised he'd find something, but 2 years later he was still piecing together contract work. Meanwhile, the mortgage payments were real, so were the HOA dues, and in his words, that deck was supposed to be something I could control. Something I built that made this place feel like it was actually ours. He looked away when he said it, and I caught a glimpse of that knot in his jaw, not anger this time, shame. I let out a long breath. I get it, I said, but Greg, you didn't build on your own land. He nodded. I know. I didn't offer to fix it for him. I wasn't there yet, probably never would be. But I said, you're going to need a proper contractor to bring it into code, fast. I can't afford that. Then you better learn to demo fast too. He smirked. That offer to help still stand. I didn't smirk back. I'll let you borrow my wheelbarrow. The next morning, something weird happened. I woke up, stepped onto my patio with a cup of coffee, and Greg waved. Waved. No glares, no sarcasm, just a small, tired wave like we were normal neighbors again. I nodded back. Then he got to work. He spent the weekend taking the entire platform down to the joists, ripped up the last of the overhanging beams, cut the encroaching post off at ground level, and filled the hole with topsoil. He even put up a temporary orange construction fence while the area was bare. The HOA came by Monday, took photos, and marked the case in progress. The city, they weren't as quick to forgive. Greg got slapped with a $2,500 fine and a 3-month permit hold. He couldn't build anything new until he submitted new blueprints and had them approved twice, once by the HOA and once by the city's zoning board, but at least he avoided the daily fines. The privacy screen gone, Amanda took a hammer to it herself. I watched her swing with more force than necessary, cathartic probably. Later that week I saw her at the grocery store. She nodded. "I'm sorry," she said, "for everything." I said thanks. And that was it. No long speech, no awkward apology dinner, just a pivot. Summer rolled in. Grass grew back where the deck had scarred the lawn. I finished restaining my fence and added solar lights to the posts, not to make a point, just because I liked them. One evening I saw Greg hauling lumber out of his truck, smaller cuts pre-measured, not deck-sized. I called over, "What's the project?" "Planter boxes," he said. "Amanda wants vegetables." I nodded. "You cedar lasts longer." He gave me a thumbs up. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like peace. But I wasn't dumb enough to think it would last forever. Because the thing about property lines, they're only peaceful when both people care where they end. Halfway through mowing the back lawn, I spotted the neon green flag in the grass. I didn't stop the mower, not right away, because part of me hoped I'd imagined it. But there it was, plastic survey tape fluttering near the far corner, right where our properties met again. Greg wasn't outside. Neither was Amanda. But I turned off the mower and walked over to inspect it. A fresh little marker, like the kind utility companies use when they're planning a dig. The soil around it looked disturbed, not dramatically, but enough to catch my eye. And I knew right then something was brewing. It had been almost 4 months since the deck drama fizzled out. For a while, things actually felt normal. Greg and I kept a respectful distance. No more sideways glances. He focused on his raised beds and solar pathlights. I refinished my shed, did a little landscaping. But I should have known better. Quiet doesn't mean settled. Sometimes it just means someone's reloading. I waited until evening when Greg came out to water his tomato plants. I didn't even say hi, just pointed to the flag. "What's that for?" He followed my gaze and frowned like he was seeing it for the first time. "Oh, that's for the new fence." I blinked. "What fence?" He set down the hose and wiped his hands on his shorts. "We're thinking about enclosing the whole backyard, full perimeter. Amanda wants more privacy." "You're putting it there." "That's the property line." "No," I said calmly. "That is 8 inches into my yard. You remember the survey, right?" He nodded like this was just some friendly misunderstanding. Yeah, but I had a new one done. Fresh survey, different guy, said the old measurements were off." I crossed my arms. "You didn't think to mention that before planting flags." He shrugged, didn't think it was a big deal. There it was again, that same casual, almost innocent delivery, like he was narrating a recipe, not about to start another boundary war. I took a breath. "Send me the new report." He hesitated. "Sure, I'll email it over." Spoiler alert, he didn't. 2 days passed, no email, no text. Just more flags. Now there were 4, 2 on my side, 2 hugging the old line. It was like he was building a constellation of maybes, waiting to see what he could get away with. So I called my surveyor back. His name's Rick, salt of the earth guy, wears the same beige vest every job. When I told him what was happening, he sighed so hard I heard it through the phone. "Want me to come back out?" "Yeah, with copies of the original." "Got it." Rick came the next morning and double-checked everything. Same conclusion, Greg's flags were off, again. This time, Rick brought wooden stakes with fluorescent tops and hammered them in, deep and unmistakable. He even took video documentation, walking the line and narrating each coordinate like he was filming a how-to guide for pissed-off neighbors. "You might want to document this now," Rick said. "If he tries to build anything on your side, you'll have proof in court." Court? I didn't want it to get there. But I wasn't going to roll over either. I gave Greg one last shot. Knocked on his door. This time Amanda answered. She looked tired again, not just annoyed, but weary, like this whole thing was draining her too. Hey, I said, keeping my tone even. I need to talk to Greg, it's about the flags. She sighed. I told him not to mess with that. That caught me off guard. You told him? She nodded. He's been weird ever since the deck thing. Says you embarrassed him. He embarrassed himself. She leaned against the door frame. You don't have to convince me. I've got a whole Pinterest board full of backyard ideas and he won't even finish the planters. There was a silence between us, not awkward, more like a shared pause. Then she said, give me the survey, I'll show it to him. I handed her a copy and left it at that. A week passed, no fence construction, no more flags. For a moment I thought we'd reach Dayton again. Until the letter arrived. Certified mail. From a property law firm downtown. It read, this letter serves as formal notice of intent to contest the property boundary between Lot 26 and Lot 27. Our client, Mr. Gregory Vanier, has commissioned a new survey which contradicts previous measurements. And on it went. 3 pages of legal jargon trying to undo reality. Now I'm not a lawyer, but I've been around contracts long enough to know one thing. People don't hire attorneys unless they think they can win or they're bluffing with money they don't have. I forwarded the letter to my own lawyer, Gary, who's helped me with small business contracts for years. He called me after reading it. Let me guess, he said, your neighbor's full of crap. Basically. You've got your original survey. Yep, stamped, signed, documented. Then we respond once, clearly, and we don't blink. Gary drafted a reply that made me want to frame it. It politely shredded Greg's claims line by line, citing municipal records, GPS data, and precedent from a prior boundary dispute in our county that had gone very badly for the claimant. Then he ended it with this line. Should your client wish to pursue this matter further, we are confident the court will find in our favor and may consider awarding attorney's fees. We mailed it. And waited. No response for 2 weeks. But something changed. Greg stopped making eye contact altogether. The tomato beds wilted. The grass near the fence line grew longer than usual. Then one morning, the survey flags were gone. All of them just disappeared. I didn't say anything, neither did Amanda, but I noticed her car started leaving earlier in the mornings, and Greg, he wasn't around much at all. Then I heard from Mrs. Latham again that they'd listed the house. I didn't believe it at first. But I checked Zillow that night. Sure enough, new listing, motivated seller needs TLC. Photos showed only the inside, no deck, no backyard shots, no mention of custom improvements. I'm not proud to say I laughed. But I did. Quietly. To myself. Then I shut my laptop and walked out to my freshly mowed backyard, breathing deep under the string lights I'd hung over the patio. Greg was leaving. The war was ending. But I knew one thing for sure. That line in the dirt, it's not where the property ends, it's where character begins. The for sale sign wasn't crooked, just tired. It stood at the edge of Greg's lawn like an employee clocking out early, half leaning, half waiting for someone else to take over. Every time I glanced at it through the blinds, I couldn't decide if it looked more like surrender or strategy. They listed it at $40,000 under market. I know because I looked it up, not to gloat, okay, maybe a little, but mostly because I wanted to understand what their angle was. The photos were bland, the description vague, and the only open house was scheduled for a Monday afternoon. No weekends, no signs of them wanting this to drag out. They wanted out fast. And I couldn't blame them. Even a truce built on silence eventually collapses under tension. I'd done everything I could to keep things neighborly, but the truth is, some people don't want a neighbor, they want a buffer, and when the buffer pushes back, they fold or flee. Amanda was the one who told me directly. I was out front trimming the hedge. She walked over in jeans and an old college hoodie, coffee mug in hand, the weight of years in her shoulders. We're moving, she said without preamble. I nodded. I figured. Her voice was soft. It's not just you, or the deck, or the survey. I didn't say anything. I let her talk. He hasn't been himself since we moved here, thought building something would fix it. The deck, then the fence, then... She stopped. I told him we needed a reset, a real one, somewhere with less tension. Fresh start, I said. She looked at me, and for once, there wasn't resentment or apology in her eyes, just fatigue. Thanks for not making it worse. I wanted to say I didn't have to, he did that on his own. But I didn't. Instead, I nodded, good luck with the move. They were gone within 3 weeks. No farewell barbecue, no handshakes, just a moving truck, a slammed tailgate, and one last glance over the shoulder from Greg as he got in the car. I watched from my front porch, arms crossed, not waving. He didn't wave either. The for sale sign came down the next morning. The new neighbors are a retired couple from Vermont, the Hansons, real mellow. They introduced themselves with a bottle of wine and a list of things they don't want to change about the property. Your fence is beautiful, Mr. Hanson said. I laughed, thanks, it leans less than it used to. They walked the property line with me, took photos, asked real questions about drainage, tree roots, sprinkler lines. Mrs. Hanson even asked, would it be weird if we planted lavender against this side? It smells great, but I don't want to offend you. I almost hugged her. That weekend, I mowed both lawns, not out of obligation, just because I felt like it. And as I came around the back corner where Greg's deck used to loom, I caught myself grinning. The scar was still there in the dirt, a dark outline of where the beams had rested, but nature has a funny way of healing. Grass was starting to push through, weeds too, but the good kind, soft-stemmed, bright green, a sign of life returning. I sat on my back steps with a beer in hand, the evening warm and still, and thought about everything that had happened. About how quickly neighborliness can curdle into rivalry. About how entitlement doesn't always shout, sometimes it just builds quietly where it doesn't belong. And about how boundaries, literal and otherwise, are only respected when people choose to honor them. I kept the surveyor's report. Framed it actually. It hangs in my shed office now, next to a print of the original fence blueprint and a sticky note Amanda once left on my door that read, "Fence looks good now. Peace." It reminds me that justice doesn't always show up with a gavel or a courtroom. Sometimes it's just a well-measured line in the dirt, one you fight to protect not because it's a few inches of land, but because it's yours. Because you built it. Because someone else thought they could take it without asking. And because when you finally make them back off, they don't come back. If this story moved you, subscribe for more real-life confessions and emotional journeys like this one.